Hello and welcome to the Commentary Hub with a special show regarding the Premier League charges for Everton and Nottingham Forest, who both breached P&S, as you can see on the screen there with the overlay that we've got up today. Joining me is, as always, my regular co-host on the Premier League preview and review shows. Paul James is with me. Paul, how are you?
Good, thank you, Russ.
Good to hear, my friend. And I've also been joined by Nottingham Forest fan Luke Turton with us today as well. Luke, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Russ. I'm good, thanks.
Good to hear, my friend. And people may hear me with a bit of a spring in the step, and that's because my team Leeds, we're not in the Premier League at the moment, trying to get back to the top flight of English football, beat Preston North End earlier today, 2-1 thanks to a late Yoel Puro penalty. So if you're wondering why I'm buzzing and sounding like I've got a smile on my face, that is a reason why. Well, nothing about that for now. Let's just go across to the matter in hand, and we'll discuss the statement from the Premier League first of all. And Everton and Nottingham Forest have each confirmed to the Premier League, this is the Premier League statement from last Monday, that they are in breach of the league's profit and sustainability rules, PSR or PNS, as we like to call it. This is a result of sustaining losses above the permitted thresholds for the assessment period ending season 2022-2023. The Premier League statement goes, in accordance with the Premier League rules, both cases have now been referred to the chair of the judicial panel, who will appoint separate commissions to determine their appropriate sanctions. Commissions are independent of the Premier League and member clubs. Their proceedings in private, with the Commission's final decisions made public on the Premier League website. They say the league will make no further comment until that time. Everton released their statement on the same day, and this is what they had to say. They said, Everton Football Club acknowledge the Premier League's decision to refer a breach of profit and sustainability rules, PSR, for the assessment period ending with the 22-23 season to an independent Premier League commission. This relates to a period which covers seasons 2019-20, 2021, 21-22 and 22-23. Therefore, it includes the financial periods 2019-20, 2021 and 21-22, for which the club has already received a 10-point sanction. The club is currently appealing that sanction. That is for the 10-point deduction, which has been given to Everton, by the way, guys, just in case you weren't aware of that. The Premier League does not have guidelines which prevent a club being sanctioned for alleged breaching in financial periods which have already been subject to punishment, unlike other governing bodies, including the EFL. As a result, because of the Premier League's new commitment to deal with such matters in season, the club is in a position where it has no option but to submit a PSR calculation which remains subject to change pending the outcome of the appeal. The club now must defend another Premier League complaint, which includes the same financial periods for which it has already been sanctioned before that appeal has even been heard. The club take this view that this results from a clear deficiency in the Premier League's rules. Everton can assure its fans it will continue to defend its position during the ongoing appeal, and should they be required to do so at any future commission, and the impact on supporters will be reflected as part of that process. Nottingham Forest released a statement saying Nottingham Forest acknowledged the statement from the Premier League, confirming that the club has today been charged with a breach of the league's profit and sustainability rules, PNS rules. The club intends to cooperate fully with the Premier League on this matter and are confident of a speedy and fair resolution. So that is the statements from the Premier League, from Everton and from Nottingham Forest. Before we get the thoughts of Paul James with his thoughts on all that which you've just heard there. Let me just go to Nottingham Forest fan Luke Turton. And Luke, as a fan of Nottingham Forest, having heard the stemming from the Premier League, heard the stemming from Nottingham Forest, and obviously heard the stemming from Everton as well, which is for both of you. What's your outcome on this as a Nottingham Forest fan on the Forest perspective?
Well, I'm not overly surprised, and we'll get on to why I'm not overly surprised later. But I'm not overly surprised that we've been charged. I'm also not surprised that Everton have been charged because both of the clubs would have been watched heavily after Everton's first charge. And yeah, I'm not going to say too much. I'm disappointed that the club has not put out anything more detailed on this than just acknowledging it. But at the same time, we'll see what comes of the actual independent panel, see what we actually get.
Yes, there's been talks that both clubs, this is nothing official as of yet with regards to the points deduction, but there's been talks that both clubs, Everton and Nottingham Forest, will receive a 6-point deduction, which means Everton will go from being on a 10-point deduction to having a 16-point deduction to their target. Forest have a -6, which would, as the table stands going into this weekend's matches with Forest playing yesterday, so the result doesn't really change anything. Forest and Everton will drop into the bottom 3 of the Premier League table, with both Burnley and Luton getting out of there, subject to appeals from both Everton and Nottingham Forest, respectively. Before we go on to get Luke's inside information that he's worked out for us over this past week or so on the charges, let's just turn to Paul James. He's a Burnley supporter. He's looking at this from a neutral perspective before going into all the finance side of things. We've been a financial student as well as a part of the team here on the commentary. But Paul, looking at it from an outsider's looking in, can you understand why both clubs have been charged? First of all, what's your thoughts of it overall on both Everton's and Nottingham Forest charges before we get into the financial situation a little bit later on?
Well, with me being a Burnley fan, people are going to say I've got a dog in this fight. The reality is, I still think Burnley will go down, even if both teams are deducted 6 points. So I'll just deal with that matter straight away. But I do feel these profit and sustainability regulations are in place for a reason. Everybody mourns the loss of a football club when it goes into financial ruin. So these rules are in place so that doesn't happen. So I do support these regulations. There is an issue with Nottingham Forest involving the sale of Brennan Johnson, which might involve Forest being able to appeal their decision and get a successful decision. I'll go into that later when I go into the financial side of it. But if you've broken these regulations, in my opinion, you should be punished for them. We're trying to maintain the future of football, and the future of football clubs have been around for a very long time. Nottingham Forest have been around for a very, very long time, and so have Everton. So, yeah, I fully support these rules and regulations and any penalties that go along with them.
Yes, absolutely. Just like to get your thoughts. And yes, Paul has always maintained, even when I mentioned about the potential points deductions for both clubs, he still thinks Burnley will go down, guys. He just doesn't have an agenda for both of these clubs. He still thinks Burnley will go down. I think Sheffield United will go down as well. But I'm not sure on the other one. I think Burnley and Sheffield United will be the two of the 3 to go down. I'm not sure about the other one either, Paul. I'm not sure who will join you, but I think those 2 will go down. But I think Burnley will go down as well. Before we go back to Paul to go on the financial side of things for both Everton and Nottingham Forest, Luke has done some digging into the Nottingham Forest side of things for us. And Luke, do you want to tell the listeners what you found out from the Forest side of things and the information that you've got down there?
Thirdly, I hope everyone's sitting comfortably. This could get quite messy quite quickly. First off, the accounts for Forest take across 2 championship seasons and the first Premier League season. So you can lose 30 million across 2 championship seasons and then 35 over 1 Premier League season. That is a total of 61 million across 3 seasons. So, obviously, there's a lot more that comes into it than just transfer fees paid out and wages. But let's just look at the absolute madness that we have found ourselves in. First off, you have to question the deals we did in maybe the first season of these accounts that have been looked at, when we had Bashiru, Lyle Taylor, and Abdoulaye Diallo, who hardly featured for us. That's wages we are paying to players that aren't actually doing anything for the club. Now, talking of doing nothing for the club, I also present to you Harry Arter. Everybody remember him? Former Bournemouth and Fulham player? Yeah. He's still contracted to Nottingham Forest. He got a pay rise when we got promoted. Who thought that was a good idea? That doesn't make much financial sense. But anyway, he's still here, taking money out of the club. Then, in the second season, we had a managerial change, Houghton to Cooper. So that's Houghton's staff and then Cooper's staff that need paying. So that's also contributing to the accounts. Then we get promoted at the end of the season. And we lose 12 players from the squad. Probably more if you looked at the amount of loans we had out at that point. So we really had to add. And yes, we did add. But I calculated we needed 9 players for our starting lineup. Not quite the 22 that we actually had in through the door. Now, it's worthy of note that amongst this list of players in this promotion season, we broke our transfer record twice, which was at the £13 million mark already, which was ages ago under Aitor Karanka when we signed João Carvalho. Again, not a deal that made financial sense, but that's outside of the 3-year remit we're looking at. So we haven't had great financial sense for quite a long time. But within this current list of players for the summer of the Premier League for the 35 million that we can have as a loss, we actually had Gibbs White's deal could total up to 42.6 if he hits all of his add-ons, but let's cap that to think about 27, I think is the figure that we'd actually paid as an initial fee. Then we did Taiwo Awonyi at 17.5. You've got Oran Mangala at 12.6. You got Niakate at 12.8. The joint deal for Toffolo and O'Brien was 10.62. You then signed Kouyaté on a free, Lingard on a free, but both of those are on Premier League wages. Wayne Hennessy's on Premier League wages. He was also a free. So it's all starting to mount up. And then you took in 20 million for Emmanuel Dennis. You've then done 17 million over 4 years for Nico Williams. I'll get into some of the split deals in a second. And then you go into the madness, which is Freuler on 7.6. You've got the signings of Bola, Hwang Wee-jo, Loic Bardet. The list goes on and on and on. Serge Aurier signed as well on Premier League wages. Some of these would have had to take a little bit of a pay cut to join Forest, but not a huge amount, so it still totals up. Then in January, just because we hadn't signed enough, we then added a few more. Chris Wood, remember his deal where he played about 3 games and then got signed for 15 million? That is now starting to make a bit more sense this year than it did last year, but not the £15 worth, sorry. John Joe Shelby signs. Why? Andre Ayew. Why? I mean, we're not making much financial sense from a club that started off basing it on being the quickest team in the league. You spent a lot of money on wages for players that haven't really repaid us for what they've actually had in. There's also an 8.5 million deal for Omar Richards Olympiacos has seen him play more than we have because he spent the first year injured. So we paid money for a player that basically was injured during his medical. Again, not really great financial sense. Then you look at a few of the other stats that I've got here. There's reports that Jesse Lingard's on 110 a week. Again, that's 110,000 a week. That's calculated at an annual salary of 6 million. I do think that that's probably a bit lower for what we actually did, but um, you're never going to find the exact figures out for what Jesse Lingard was actually on. The deal for Nico Williams is 17 million spread over 4 years. So that's technically 4.25 on the actual accounts that the Premier League will be looking at. And there's the same deals that are split over for Taiwo, Gibbs White, and Emmanuel Dennis. They'll have been split over the length of their contracts, so they're not as huge as the original total outlays. But when you listen to the list that I gave you to start off with, of how many the total millions we've spent in that one summer, I am not surprised that we've got charged. But again, we've not learned our lesson much because you look at this season's total, which will come into the next set of 3 years. We spent 18 million on 2 goalkeepers there. I mean, we're spending ridiculous amounts of money on players that aren't actually up to that level. And again, it's also worthy of noting that the recruitment strategies here are split between 3. And I've said this about probably 7 or 8 times on videos now, but our recruitment was between the Steve Cooper mould, as was, the German mould and George Sirianis, which you can level Taiwo, Mangala, Niakate, and there's hints of Loic Bardet being one of those two. He was a player that came in and went straight back out without playing nearly about half of a game of football for us. That was shocking. We did the same thing with Andre Santos this year. Brought him in. He played one cup game and didn't do anything with him. We're not learning anything from the signings we're actually making, yet we're having to fund these deals. There is the argument on Brennan Johnson's sale. I think if we're trying to rely on one player's sale to comply with the regulations, then we should really get punished anyway. Mainly just for the fact that you've signed 42 players since we've actually gone up to the Premier League. That in itself is absolutely atrocious. Why can we not recruit better in the first place and get, say, a squad of 22 and work with them than spending like ridiculous amounts of money every season just to compete in the league? There are teams like Brentford, Brighton that have come up and have not spent a huge amount of money and are still operating within FFP. This seems to be very, very ridiculous of what we've done, and we seem to have looked at it and gone, oh, yes, we spent so long out of the Premier League, we've now got all of this money, let's just go and spend it however we like. And it's not really worked. It didn't work on the field. We end up scraping to stay up last season anyway. And now we've put ourselves in the potential to have a points deduction to fight to stay up again this year. It's not really worked out very well for Mr. Marinakis on his let's not just make the numbers up in the Premier League. You can buy these players, but if you're buying the list that I've read out, I didn't even mention Willy Bolly either in that list of Premier League experience and Premier League wages. If you're spending that much on that many players, it is hardly worth it, to be honest, because you've signed some players that you've been chasing after for quite a while. Gibbs White's deal is definitely proving sound investment, but I question the Omar Richards, the Biancon deal, Bardet, Hennessy to a degree. I mean, you probably could have looked at using a keeper that we actually hadn't, even Horvath. as a backup keeper. There wasn't much planning, I don't think. I think we just kind of scattergunned a load of transfers into the mix. We needed to replace 9 players because we lost Samba, Spence, Graben, Davis, Zinkernagel, Max Lowe, Lolly, and Garner from the squad that was actually playing in that promotion season. But you 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 can add 9 players and then get in some smart business. We just signed 2 11s, which is basically saying the players that we actually had in the squad from the promotion season that were still there just weren't good enough, and I think a few of them are still here. So yeah, I'm overly not surprised that we've got charged. I think the Brennan Johnson argument is a bit cheap. Yes, okay, if it gets us off, I'm still not going to be celebrating because I still think we should get charged and get probably a points deduction and pay the price for what we actually did in that summer. But I think the arguments with the clubs really, Russ.
Yes, great assessment there from the Nottingham Forest side of things with Luke Turton. Thank you very much for that, Luke. There. Now, is everybody still sitting comfortably? Because if we are, I'm about to hand over to one of our financial experts here on the Commentary Hub, in Paul James, who can go through all the financial side of both Everton and Nottingham Forest with the charges, plus some stuff which one of his friends has also sent across to him as well. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Russ. Just to be clear, I'm not an expert. I'm doing my bachelor's degree in commerce. I'm an accounting student. I don't consider myself yet an expert, but I do have some understanding on this stuff. So I'm going to go over it now, and we'll start with the PSR regulations, which Lucas touched at as well. But I'll just go into a little bit more detail. The general rule is clubs must not go into the red by an accumulative amount of 50 million over 3 seasons. However, if the owner bankrolls the club with 30 million for each of the 3 seasons with what is known as secure funding, then Premier League clubs can go to 105 million. Now, that doesn't help Nottingham Forest. In Forest's case, 61 million. There is also the amortization rule. Now, in case you don't know what that is, I'll explain it to you in a very simple example. Let's assume that a club buys Bruno Fernandes for 100 million pounds, and they sign him to a 5-year contract. You can pay that transfer fee off over 5 years at 20 million per year. So that gives you a little bit of extra wiggle room, if you will. What is not included in profit and sustainability rules is infrastructure, academy, money coming into the women's team. These are considered separate. Okay. I'm going to move on to Nottingham Forest and the issue with Brennan Johnson. Lucas suggested that that's cheap and a cheap argument, and it might very well be. But this is the rules in relation to that. Because Nottingham Forest are a publicly traded company, they fall under the generally accepted accounting principles regulations, which means if a criteria for an asset held for sale, Brennan Johnson will be considered a huge asset for Nottingham Forest because of his age, because of his ability, because of his potential, and the fact that he's an international. So basically, Nottingham Forest would have had to have noted on their financial statements that they had intended to sell Brennan Johnson because it would have affected decision makers, and decision makers are potential investors or current stakeholders. Okay. So there are certain regulations, not just that. They can't just state that they intend to sell him. It goes deeper than that. Management has to commit on a plan to sell the asset, i.e. identifying the asset, as I mentioned on the statement, setting an expected date for completion. The asset is available for sale in its present condition. So in other words, in Brennan Johnson's case, it's not injured or in any kind of a disabled or any way that could affect his playing career. Management has initiated an active program to locate a buyer. So they've transfer marketed him, or that it's known within the footballing world that he's available for sale. The sale is probable and expected to be close within 1 year. The selling price is reasonable. Now, I'll get to that in a moment. to the asset's current fair value, it is unlikely there will be any changes in or withdrawal of the plan to sell the asset. Okay, so it goes a little bit deeper than just notifying them. So it's reasonable for Nottingham Forest to say, well, we're waiting for his net realizable value. We're waiting for his fair value before we sell it. In this case, they had him at 41 million pounds and said this is his fair value, okay, which eventually Tottenham paid. The carrying value is calculated as the original cost less any accumulated depreciation. So any physical depreciation on Brennan Johnson, such as his age, that sort of thing. There wouldn't have been much on Brennan Johnson. He was a very, very young man, so that's really not relevant. Now, again, if the Premier League decide to uphold these charges, they may very well be in breach of GAAP. However, this sort of thing is very, very sort of, it's not set in stone. There's a lot of grey areas here. So it's very well that a good lawyer for the Premier League could argue the fact that they haven't fulfilled some of this criteria. So we'll wait and see on that. But that just gives you a little bit more of an insight into the Nottingham Forest situation. With Everton, to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure with Everton. If they have broken those regulations and they have gone over the full amount, it seems a bit unreasonable that you should be further punished for it when they've already received a 10-point deduction. But we'll wait and see on that.
Thank you very much there, Paul. And I know you said one of your friends had sent you some stuff in as well, Paul. Would you like to read that out for us, please?
Yeah, that's basically what I've just read out. So it's basically that's from my friend John. He is a senior senior accounting technician and compliance manager.
Thank you very much there, Paul. And thank you to John. And also pass on your thanks to John from everyone here at the Commentary Hub, JB Sports Commentary Hub 2, Focus on Football, Storm FM, and also Turton Talks Football, where this one will go out on this today as well. So thank you very much to John there, and also thank you to Paul and to Luke for their excellent situations there. So just before we do wrap up this broadcast, I just want to ask you both a question, which is, I want a one-word answer from both of you. Luke, I'll come to you first. Everton and Forest, do they get those points deducted?
Yes.
Or what do you think?
Yes.
So, and I also think yes as well. So unanimously, we think both Everton and Forest will get those extra points deducted from, well, Everton with extra ones, Forest with the first lot of points deducted.
Just to touch on that, Russ, I don't think Everton should receive an extra 6 points. I think they've already been punished for this period with the 10 points. I don't think Everton should receive extra. I think Forest should, because of basically the reasons Luke mentioned earlier. But I think Everton have already been punished once for these charges. I don't think they should be punished a second time.
Yes, thank you very much for that there, Paul, as well. So thank you to Paul, thank you to Luke for their insight into this, and especially Luke's insight into this situation from the Nottingham Forest side of things. So thank you very much to both of you. I've been Russ, he's been Paul, he's been Luke, we've been the Commentary Hub, JB Sports, Commentary Hub 2, Focus on Football, Storm FM, and also Turton Talks Football as well. So from all the team here, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. It's goodbye for now.